Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
I remember them telling me like, yeah, you do this at home every month. And I thought that was really scary. Like, I was like, I have no medical background. I wasn't even good at math and science growing up. And you think that I can inject myself at home?
Welcome to Talking Head Pain, the podcast that confronts head pain head on. Hi, I'm Joe Coe, Director of Education Digital Strategy at the Global Healthy Living Foundation and a migraine patient for over 20 years. I'm here today with an amazing and interesting advocate, CarmenRose. Carmen's going to talk to us about social media, about her history, and about how she's helped people deal with this chronic disease. Hi, CarmenRose. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am great. It's been an interesting morning, but it keeps life going, those interesting mornings.
Absolutely. I'm really excited to be here.
I like to start all of our episodes asking for folks to walk us through their worst migraine attack. What did you feel? What went through your head? Paint the picture for us.
Yeah, it actually happened recently. And it's funny, I'd been wanting, and when I say funny, I don't actually mean funny. I've been wanting to document a migraine attack for the longest time on social media. It kept being in my mind, like one of these days I gotta show people what it's like because it's all invisible. And the only time it gets a little visible is like just my partner sees it. So I kept telling myself like, oh, one of these days I gotta do it. And then I woke up one day, I had come back from traveling, and most mornings I start with a migraine. I wake up with a little bit of head pain, and then as I wake up, have some water, have some coffee, it'll go away. So a typical migraine day. And I was like, I'm just gonna document it today. Today's gonna be the day. I had no idea the nail in the coffin it was gonna be my worst one. But I, took over the counter head pain medicine. I took my abortive medicine and it didn't work. I did peppermint oil. I was trying everything in my toolkit, in my little tool belt that I say. I couldn't eat, so I couldn't take certain medicine. It was getting really hard. And I realized it was the worst I had was it got to the point where I couldn't stop moving. Like I was in so much pain that I physically couldn't stop moving. And I started to I would sort of tap myself or hit myself a little bit because it would distract me from my head pain. And I would kind of rock back and forth. And I started getting really vocal and I was starting to scream and cry in the room because I just I couldn't just sit there. Usually I just, sit there, lie in pain and just try to make it go away. I literally couldn't stop moving. I got up and I went to get in the bath, hoping that would help. Nothing helped. And I remember vividly feeling that was the only time I've ever felt it got so bad that I feel like my sense of reality was skewed a little bit. My migraine attacks come from right behind my left eye. They're always behind my left eye. And that one really, really felt like it was behind my eye. And I remember it getting so bad that I was like, if I just could get an ice cream scooper and scoop my eye out, then I think the pain would go away. That's how bad it got. And it felt in my head, if I just scoop out my eye, then I'm good. The pain's gone. I was in this really, really heightened, I didn't feel like myself. And even when I was in the bath, I couldn't stop moving. I couldn't stop shaking and I was crying. And the only thing that helped was going to bed. It was one of those days where it's you hope it goes away overnight. And that was the worst one I had. And it got to the point where my partner was like, do you want to go to the hospital? Do you want to go to the ER? And I've never gone to the ER for a migraine attack. But I know there's not a standard procedure at US hospitals for a migraine attack. And the sad thing is I just was what, I'm just worried that they're not really going to be able to help me and I'm going to get stuck with a really expensive bill. I feel if we just stay home and I sleep it out, that's going to be fine. I had a lot of people telling me I should have gone to the ER, but I just was too worried that it was going to be too expensive for, not worth it. So luckily it went away overnight, but nothing worked. Literally nothing worked that day. It was just excruciating. And the first time I'd ever felt like my reality was a little bit different because I was just so heavily in that pain.
And how long were you dealing with migraine prior to this attack?
So this attack was just a month ago, and I was officially diagnosed in June of last year, so June 2021. But I've been experiencing them since the summer of 2018. So this was probably really 2 years into experiencing migraine. They've just gotten worse, but that was the pinnacle, the worst one for sure.
And how has chronic migraine changed your life?
Every aspect of my life. I'm at the point where the main thing I can do is manage my triggers, which has just totally changed my life and my lifestyle because I get letdown migraines all the time. A letdown migraine, for anyone that doesn't know, is when you go from high level of stress to low level. So it's enough for me, if my partner and I go to the mall and then we come home and I sit on the couch, like that's enough difference for my body, I'll get a migraine. So I have to manage every aspect of my life. I always say, my joke is, I'm like, I wish I could be like a normal 25-year-old and like sleep in or stay up late or, be dehydrated, miss a meal every once in a while. But if I do any of those things, I'll get a migraine. Like I have to be so regulated. I have to eat all my meals. I have to drink over 64 ounces of water. I have to get all my sleep. I can't oversleep. I can't do this. it's just so regulated. I'm like, what would it be like one day just to wake up and not take care of myself and then not be in pain, right? Because if I do that now, I'll be in pain. But I'm like, other people do that and they're just dehydrated. They're not in excruciating pain. Like, what's that like?
I think about that too, Rose, and the amount of water, particularly when I travel. It's like you have to make sure that you're drinking enough water, but then you have to make sure you have an aisle seat, because if you're drinking all that water, you're gonna have to get up a
Where's my
lot.
bathroom? Yeah.
So it's a wild world living with migraine. And you didn't always live with migraine. I read that you were in a car accident that led to a traumatic brain injury. You have had some history with a second concussion after that. So how is that process from having traumatic brain injury and then being diagnosed with migraine?
Yeah, so I got in, like I said, the summer 2018, I got in a really bad car accident, and I had the worst concussion of my life. And then it was the summer, luckily, and I was working, so I just took work off, stayed in my bed in a dark room. And then once I finally started feeling better, I got a second concussion about 2 months later, and so they just compounded on each other. And I ended up having to take the fall term. That was my senior year of college. I ended up having to take the fall term off and do an extra term because I just wasn't ready to come back. But so the first one was what made it a traumatic brain injury, but with the second one compounding, I got concussion symptoms, and I didn't know what post-concussion syndrome was. But post-concussion syndrome is just when the symptoms don't go away, but there's no really time frame for that. So I would see doctors afterwards and they would say, yep, just give it some time, it'll go away eventually. I would say, my memories are gone, give it some time, they'll come back. I'm really sensitive to light, give it some time, it'll go away. 6 months later, I'm still asking these questions. It's not going away. And this was really the first time I felt like I dealt with medical gaslighting, because I had a team, and this was a team that I had not worked with before. I was in my college town. I had been in a car accident. This wasn't like my normal team that I felt comfortable with and trusted. It was just who I got set up with after the accident. But they just kept telling me that my symptoms would go away and that it would get better. And that's the hard part with this invisible stuff, is it was hard for me to really explain what I was going through and the severity of it, because none of the stuff was visual. You can't see my nausea, you can't see my dizziness, you don't see the headache, you don't see any of that stuff. And so it was a lot of like my own research. And so for most people, migraine is genetic. That's the majority of migraine. I think the majority of it is genetic. I don't have any family history. So my migraine comes from a traumatic brain injury. And so it's just a little bit different than other people's experience. And when I originally went to a neurologist, I said, yeah, I'm getting a couple of headaches a month, and I think I get a migraine or two a month. I just thought a migraine was when it was really bad. I didn't really know what a migraine was. I left that office and she told me, you have chronic migraine, because I was getting 15 migraine. Yeah, I had no idea that the headaches that I was describing were migraine attacks. And so and it's just interesting because a lot of chronic migraine symptoms and a lot of post-concussion symptoms are similar, and they just compound on each other. Like my sensitivity to light and all my senses is really, really intense because of the post-concussion syndrome. And when I have a migraine attack, it's just even worse. So it's been really, really difficult, because it's been a lot of advocating for myself, and it took me that medical gaslighting, and then I took a couple of months to do research and find a woman of color neurologist. I wanted to find a neurologist that had similar identities as me, and that was like the most affirming thing ever. I was in her office in and out in 15 minutes. She ordered me a CT, an EEG, put me on medication, and was like, yeah, is there anything else you need? And I was like, no, that's all I've ever wanted for the past 3 years, and you did that in 15 minutes. So that was the life-changing part for me, was getting a good neurologist. But it took a really long time. I was probably experiencing headaches so it was 3 years before I got that official diagnosis.
Isn't it amazing when the system works? I mean, it's like
I was like
15
stunned.
minutes.
Yeah.
The cause of Rose's migraine is more common than one thinks. I asked Dr. McAllister about the connection between traumatic brain injury and migraine.
The most common traumatic brain injury has a little M before the TBI, and we call that mild traumatic brain injury that you'd know as a concussion. The number one symptom of concussion, and indeed all traumatic brain injuries, is headache. And then if you look at the science, the most common presentation of a concussive headache or a TBI-related headache is a migraine. It's a moderately severe, throbbing, often one-sided with light and sound sensitivity and nausea. So having a concussion or other TBI can cause migraine. And it's interesting to note that if you have two, say, identical aged people and you bang their heads very hard, one of them might have a sore head for a day or two, and the other then has migraine after migraine. And what we're finding now is that latter person was likely wired for the genetics of migraine. So often, even if they've never had a migraine before, I say to them with their post-traumatic, post-concussive headaches, anyone in your family have migraine? And they say, oh yes, my mother, my aunt, my brother all have migraines. I just never had it. And we think here, the brain injury, the TBI, is just the match that lit the fire that was already in their genetics in the first place. Thing number two is that if you already have migraines and then have the bad luck of having a concussion or a TBI, it tends to worsen the headache condition. And the term chronification means to go from a small number of monthly migraines to a much higher number. And if you look at the risk factors, what are the risk factors for chronification of migraine? One of the big ones is having had a concussion or other TBI. So it goes both ways.
So are migraines that are caused by TBI treated the same as migraines that are caused by genetic or environmental factors?
Yes, we treat post-traumatic, post-concussive migraines about the same way. It's interesting, Joe, how many drugs are FDA approved for the treatment of post-traumatic headache? And the answer is 0. So what we do is we look at the way it presents. So after your concussion or TBI, if you have a throbbing, nauseous, light-sensitive headache, we call that a post-traumatic migraine, and we treat it like a migraine. If conversely, the second most common presentation is a dull, mild to moderate band around the head, we call that a post-traumatic tension type headache. So we really go for the symptoms, what we call the phenotype. How does it express? When it expresses like a migraine, we treat it like a migraine.
It's amazing. And I'm so happy that that neurologist shared about the headache days. And that's something that we talk about a lot on Talking Head Pain, that we think about migraine as the days that we are incapacitated and can't get out of bed. And those are obviously migraine attacks and migraine days. But we often, I know I didn't for many years, the headache that I had almost every day, that was just a baseline headache, I thought that was normal, and it's not normal, folks.
Right.
So talk to your doctors, and if your doctors are doing what CarmenRose's previous team did, find other doctors, because it's really important to give yourself every opportunity to feel better.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit, CarmenRose, and talk about social media. I follow your journey on social media. I am really impressed with how you share your injection for your prevention treatment on social media. As someone who is needle phobic, I am. That has been something during my migraine journey that I've had to struggle and grapple with. And I went into an appointment when I knew I was going to get an injection, and I said to myself, okay, Joe, this is what your body needs. It's going to help you. Just trying to get out of my own head. So I think it's really helpful that you share your injections on social media and walk people through that. Can you talk about your tips for injection day and why you started doing that?
Yeah. So my goal with social media was always to bring visibility to invisible disabilities. I felt like there was so much I was going through that people didn't know. And it was amazing to connect with other chronic migraine folks online and they got it. But I still felt like my family, my friends, anybody who just hasn't experienced it in their personal life or is not with somebody, even if it's your mother or if you don't live with that person, beyond that, you really don't get it. And so I really wanted, even just within my own circle at first, for people to understand what I'm going through. I talk about being in pain a lot, but I don't think people realize I have to do these injections once a month. I have to go through all this, and I had to fail certain medications to get there. Like that whole process that we don't even talk about. And so it started with wanting to bring that visibility, and it turned into something that I didn't even realize, because so many people have messaged me saying, this is so amazing to see you do this. It makes me feel less alone. And I didn't, like, the beginning of my migraine journey was really lonely, because I didn't feel like I saw people that looked like me going through this. Even just people my age, I thought of migraine as something like middle-aged people get. I definitely didn't think of it as anything somebody in their 20s could be experiencing. I just didn't see it. I definitely had never seen anyone do an injection. When my neurologist was talking about it, I immediately went home and like did YouTube videos. Like, what does that look like? Because I'm very visual, and I'm also very anxious. So I like to know a lot before I go into it. Like, if I can literally be from beginning to end, see what I'm going to do, then I'm going to feel so much better before I do it. So I also was like, I've never seen anyone do an injection. I can't be the only one that's curious about what it looks like. Like, what if somebody is on a medication and their next step is the injection, and they're like, what does that look like? Like, I wanted to see what that looked like. So I wanted to show other people. And I didn't think it would be as powerful as it was, but people have, felt really validated and seen. And I feel really silly whenever I post it, because my pain face, like, I don't edit it. It's just the raw video of like me doing it, and my pain, especially with my most recent injections, because I'm on a new one, they're more painful. And my pain face was like so silly, I almost didn't post it. And people were like, no, that's exactly what I look like at home too, though. Like, that's real. That's what it is. And I've seen a lot of other people, sort of edit out their face or do other stuff. And I'm like, no, this is what it is. This is how real it is. I want people to see what I have to go through to not even be cured, right? Like, it's not even like these injections then fix everything. This is what I have to go through to just help my baseline. And tips, well, I think like scientifically they say, leave your injection out, for it to warm up to room temperature. So I hope everyone's doing that. That's apparently supposed to help. I think my favorite advice though that I got on one of my posts was this woman told me that she shuts all the blinds, shuts all the doors, and just screams. She was like, I just do the injection and I just scream. I shut all the doors, all the lights, just like block out all the noise, and I just like do it and I scream. I was like, that's not a bad idea, injection day or not. Like, I'm gonna take you up on that, like whether it's an injection day or not.
I might do that after this recording.
Right? I'm like, next time I have a migraine attack, I might just do that. I don't know why I haven't thought about it.
What I'm hearing you say and reflecting on my experiences is that we need to use what we know helps us. So you found that you didn't have resources, you didn't see good resources around injections. You're like, I'm going to take control of that, and I'm going to show people, so people like me that want to see it can find me on Instagram and do the injection. And I think that's really important that you use that fear and anxiety that you experience to create some change and help people in our community. So I thank you for that. I think that's amazing work. And I would want someone to come and like surprise me with the injection. Like, oh, you got it.
Yeah, see, at the end of the day, I just feel like when I'm at the point where I'm getting migraine attacks every day, and people are always like, how do you do it? And I'm like, if 10 seconds of pain, if you tell me that there's even a possibility of relief, I'll do it. Like 10 seconds of pain once a month, but you could find relief, do it once a month. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll try it. It's worth it.
And some people don't find it painful, which blows my mind too. So it's like, we don't know, like, you don't know. You could be one of those people that it's like nothing. And for a lot of folks, I hear that is nothing. For some, I hear that it's momentarily. But, I think all of us have had a lot of exposure to getting vaccinated. With the COVID pandemic. We might not have really done that if we're younger, since we were in college. So I think that showed us that like the temporary injection is not that bad.
And I remember thinking when I first got it, I remember them telling me like, yeah, you do this at home every month. And I thought that was really scary. Like, I was like, I have no medical background. I wasn't even good at math and science growing up. And you think that I can inject myself at home? And I think that was what motivated me too, because I was like, that feels really scary. But once she explained it to me and I did it the first time, I was like, okay, it's a little intimidating the first time, but it's not scary in the way I pictured it when she first said was like, you're going to inject yourself at home. So I think too, I just wanted to show people it doesn't have to be as scary as you think it is. Like, look, I'm a regular person doing it, right? I'm not like Khloe Kardashian on the ads. Like, I'm a regular person, real person that does it at home. And I just felt like I hadn't seen that. And there were so many people that commented on it and were like, yeah, I do mine too, and gave me tips. And just knowing you're not alone, even the folks that were like, I can't give you any tips. It sucks and it's going to hurt, but I'm there with you. I'm like, cool. That's okay. As long as I know I'm not in it alone, that is the biggest thing. Especially with invisible disabilities, it's like finding other people that get it without you having to explain it, like truly get it. That has been like the silver lining in it all. People are super, super helpful within the community. I feel like I've gotten the best advice from folks in the community, just especially with like chronic migraine specifically, because I feel like we're still like people don't realize we're still really early into research on chronic migraine and the brain, and there's so much we don't know. Talking to other people in the community that were like, these are the steps I had to take was really helpful. And unfortunately, I think the best advice, which is like, I feel sad that you have to give this advice, but it's just the reality of our healthcare system, is like the more you learn insurance and the way your insurance works, the better. Because there are certain things, and again, it shouldn't be this way where we have to worry about coverage and price over our pain. But that's the way our healthcare system is built. So you can either like be mad and really resentful, or you can just accept that that's where it is. And as an individual, I can't change that tomorrow. So I'm going to use the system to the best of my ability. And it really is like finding really good practitioners and people, because I didn't realize that like my neurologist's nurse, she was in contact with my insurance to work on pricing. I didn't know that they could even do that in-house. I didn't know that because nobody ever told me that. And like the stuff about like step therapy, like I had to fail 2 types of medications before my insurance would approve me for a more expensive one. And I just happened to have one doctor say, just so you know, you can count Tylenol and Advil as one of those failed medications. And so that got me quicker to the next step, because those first ones that they want you to fail, they didn't work for me at all, but they wanted to get you to the cheap ones before the expensive ones.
I went to refill my acute medication and it was denied. And I said, oh, this will be fun. And it was a prior authorization issue. And just like you're sharing, Carmen, my neurologist's office, they have an office manager that handles all of that. And I messaged my neurologist, he got the office manager involved, and I felt so bad that they had to take so much time to deal with this as opposed to actually treating me or other patients. And it's the
Right.
way that the system works. So they have delayed. I went to refill it over the weekend. Fortunately, I have enough of it left over from previous refills that I'm not like in agony. But I know people that use all of their medication, and when they get denied, even if it's a week delay, that's really detrimental. It's unfortunate that that week saves this insurance company a ton of money, because if you compound that week by hundreds and thousands of people, they're saving a ton of money by, increasing my pain.
Right.
And it's just it's an unfair system. It's not
For
made
sure.
to serve us. So you're
Yeah.
right. We can be angry and upset about it, or we can figure out how to navigate it.
And by the way, the anger is like so valid and
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's so valid. Like everyone has a reason to be angry at our healthcare system. And I was so angry in the beginning, but and so if you're still in that angry spot, like it's okay. I'm not telling you to get out of it. It's just you eventually come to a point where it's like, I can either use this to my benefit or not. I had a similar situation where I went 3 weeks without migraine medication because my insurance was just taking their time approving it. And I kept calling my neurologist, and their people kept calling it back. And it took the insurance 3 weeks. They had approved it. It just took 3 weeks for them to communicate that to the pharmacy and for it to go through and for it to be picked up. In my most recent medication, I got a new prescription and I was really excited. And I was like, I already knew. I was like, oh, this is probably going to take weeks to be approved and filled. Somehow the nurse contacted my insurance, got it approved in 24 hours, and it went to my pharmacy on like a Tuesday. So it was sent to the pharmacy. My pharmacy never filled it. For 2 weeks, I kept calling. They never filled it. So I thought there was a mistake. I called my neurologist. I said, hey, can you send in the prescription again? Again, like you said, I feel bad that I'm messaging her, hey, can you send it in again? Not your fault. You did it right the first time. Still, it didn't. And then eventually it got to the point where I was going out of town to visit my in-laws. So then I had to contact my neurologist again and say, hey, can you send it to a different pharmacy? I'm now in a different state. I filled here before. I know they're reliable. Can you again send it? And then when I got to that state and I filled it, they filled it incorrectly. They filled me for only 1 dose when my first month was supposed to be 2 doses. And I went back and said, hey, you were supposed to give me 2. And they were like, oh, well, I don't know if we can get it to you for free now. And I was like, whoa, you messed it up. And so I had to do all of this advocacy just to get my medication 3 weeks late.
So you were talking about how you were with a healthcare team that wasn't really helping you. Do you have any advice for folks that might feel trapped and that they can't leave their current healthcare team?
Yeah, absolutely. You can. First of all, you can definitely leave your team, break up with your team if you have to. Taking the time to find the best advice I give is find people with your identity. So whatever your identities are. So like for me, finding a queer doctor or finding a woman doctor or finding a woman of color or all of those things, but any sort of those things, like things that will affirm you and things that, you know, this person has been through similar things as me and they've experienced similar things and they get it. Having somebody that has similar identities as you has been life-changing for me. And I think too, what I realized in this journey, I used to think like, oh, how can I be a good patient? How can I make my doctor happy? And now I realize, like, as I'm getting new practitioners, it's an interview with you as much as it is with me. So what can you do for me? You know, how do you help your patients with insurance coverage? What do you do if a patient doesn't like their treatment plan? Blah, blah, blah. You asking these questions. So I used to just think, oh, I'm going to find somebody, they take my insurance, I'm going to call it a day. But I want to learn more about you and your values and how you approach the work. And I think the more I realize that I'm getting something out of it as much as they are, and I need to come to these appointments prepared and ready, that's been the most helpful thing for me, is finding somebody that affirms me, because then they will, like my neurologist, it took me a couple months to find her, but she would give me free samples whenever my insurance ran out of stuff. Her nurse would, work overtime for me. And so when you find the right people, it's absolutely worth it. And I went through multiple years of being with a team that didn't work for me, and I thought that there was nothing different. And I think also too, when you're disabled, it feels really hard, like, oh, I'm in so much pain, I don't have the energy to call and do that. But just take it day by day, spend one day researching, then the next day I'm just going to make the call, and then the next day I'm just going to do the follow-up paperwork. It's worth it in the end. If you put a little bit of work ahead of time, the results you're going to get with the right team. I didn't even realize how great doctors could be until I had a good doctor. And she was like, so is there anything else that you need? Or is there any questions that were left unanswered? And I was like shocked when she asked me that at the end. But that should be standard. So finding people that really affirm you and your identities has been the best thing for me for finding a good team, medical team, because that's life-changing for your process, who your team is.
So my last question, thinking about those 3 weeks of not having medication or a month or prior to getting on the prevention injection that you're on, how has that changed your life, finding these newer treatments that are working better for you?
Yeah, it's been life-changing. I feel like my partner has even told me that she feels like an older version of me came back, because we, interestingly enough, started dating before I was officially diagnosed. So she has seen me pre-chronic migraine and now the beginning of it. And same with my family. And so it really has changed my life so much to get these. And it's even just like the hope of like, okay, even if this doesn't work 100%, if it works a little bit, it gives me the hope of like, it can work in the future. And I think the best thing for migraine treatments, honestly, has been finding alternative solutions too. Like I've tried a ton of Western medicine, and a ton of it has been helpful. But I'm also more recently leaning into like, how can I help my body retrain itself? Especially since my chronic migraine comes from an accident, right? Not genetics. So, I was in an accident that tightened stuff up and made stuff sore. And so where do we need to realign stuff? And I've seen an acupuncturist before, but again, because of insurance, it's inaccessible and unaffordable. I could only go like 5 times for the year, which wasn't super helpful.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for joining me
thank you.
today. This was a great discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Talking Head Pain, the podcast that confronts head pain head on. If you like this episode, please give it an honest 5-star rating and subscribe so you never miss another one. I'm Joe Coe, and I will see you next time. This season of Talking Head Pain was made possible with support from Amgen, a sponsor of the Global Healthy Living Foundation.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.